think we'll go ahead and get started. We have a few more people in line, but I think by the time we get done with introductions, they'll have a spot. There still are some spots up in the front, so I don't think anybody has to stand tonight. Glad to see such a great crowd. I am Cliff Strain, the director of the Preservation Association, and we're very excited for the first time to have somebody from the Coast Guard speak to the community. And we've always been proud of being a community that housed the Coast Guard, and this is really exciting to see them come up and speak because they do have a very long history with Port Aransas. And Master Chief Anthony Soto did an awesome job of compiling a huge amount of over 140 years worth of pictures and documents and events into a story just for y'all tonight. And so it's really exciting. And to kind of also commemorate it, he brought some great scrapbooks that were started by different people in the Coast Guard that we have back there for you to look through. And then Mark Creighton, our archivist, and also he's one of our founding members of the group. He brought the original appointment letter of John G. Mercer to the U.S. Lifesaving Station, still in the original envelope from Washington, D.C., and that's in that piece of glass on that table by itself next to the donation jar. And speaking of donations, if you did make a donation, we certainly appreciate it. I also would like to, we always try to take every opportunity to recognize our volunteers, which includes our board members, because we just couldn't do the job we do without them. So with everybody that's a volunteer or board member, please raise your hand. There's a bunch of them. All right. And we also have Ashley right there, our Chief Operating Officer, who does a tremendous amount of work for the group and the community itself, and was responsible for all your wonderful snacks that she set out for you tonight. So I also want to point out before I introduce Anthony that next week's our last lecture. It was supposed to be this week, but we had to move Sally Palmer talking about the history of the University of Texas Marine Science Institute to next week, because that week she was scheduled, we had ice all across the front of this building, and we were afraid somebody was going to get hurt trying to come in. So it picked a much safer time for you to come back and hear a great story on the history of the university. So Chief Anthony Soto currently serves as the officer in charge at the Coast Guard Station Port Aransas. His primary responsibility is to manage a multi-mission unit with 16 active and 24 reserve members. U.S. Coast Guard Port Aransas supports Sector Corpus Christi in a safe and successful execution of search and rescue. Sorry, for some reason I just couldn't get that one out. Protection of marine life, drug, migrant interdiction, port waterway coastal security, which has become a very big deal since now we are the largest exporter of oil in the U.S. and the third busiest port. So there's a lot more traffic to contend with. And marine environmental protection and marine safety for all Corpus Christi and Port Aransas. He was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. He enlisted in the Coast Guard in 1996. His past assignments include District 13 Small Boat Manager, Seattle, Washington, Officer in Charge at Station Crisfield, Maryland, Training Petty Officer, U.S. Coast Guard Station Key West, Florida, First Lieutenant, U.S. Coast Guard Kodiak Island, Key West, Florida Operating Petty Officer, and also U.S. Coast Guard Station New York, Staten Island, where a lot of my relatives live. And First Lieutenant, U.S. Coast Guard Station Shinnecock, New York. U.S. Coast, I should have had you just do that. U.S. Coast Guard Station Sherman in Alameda, California. So he's been around. Master Chief Soto is a graduate of the Coast Guard Chief Petty Officers Academy and holds a 100-ton Master's Captain's license. His personal military awards include the Coast Guard Commendation Medal with O device, and the Coast Guard Achievement Medal with O device. And you can explain what I'm not sure what the O, is that O4? Operations. Oh, operations. The Coast Guard Good Conduct Award. He is authorized to wear a two-tone boat force insignia as well as the permanent coxsman and cutterman's insignia. So you're getting a very well-qualified speaker again tonight. So let me go ahead and let's give a round of applause and make you feel welcome.
Give me a second. Let me get on my electronics here. All right. Do I look stupid? Is this good? Okay. First of all, I want to thank Cliff. I appreciate it. When he asked me to do this this lecture, I was really excited. I was like, yeah, no problem. Right in my wheelhouse. You know, I'm in Port Aransas. And then I started diving into how long the Coast Guard has actually been part of Port Aransas, and it became a much bigger project. But I was really excited to do it. I learned a lot from the project, and I hope you enjoy it. Before I begin, like Cliff said, born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, been to Coast Guard about 28 years. First time in Texas, first time in the Gulf. Recently remarried. We have 6 kids. 3 of them are still in the house. The youngest one will be 2 in May. So I got kids when I go to work. I got kids when I come home. It's all over. All right. So we're going to start off with the Aransas Pass is a water channel known to be navigable since 1519, when Alonso Alvarez de Pinto of Spain sailed upon it to find the name Corpus Christi Bay. On August 4, 1790, Congress authorized 10 vessels to enforce laws and trade, prevent smuggling, and collect federal revenue. These vessels were assigned to the Treasury Department, and they were called the Revenue Cutter Service. Now, this is the Coast Guard's claim to fame, that we had the first vessels before the Navy. So from 1790 to 1798, the Revenue Cutter Service was the only warships protecting the coast and the maritime interests of the new republic. 1798, the Navy was established, and we lost that title. 1836, Texas broke away from Mexico. In 1845, when Texas joined the Union and the government began to improve Aransas Pass. From the Gulf, Aransas Pass would be very hard to locate. So in 1857, the government installed the Aransas Pass Lighthouse to guide mariners. You can see some of the pictures I collected from Google. Even still with the lighthouse, Aransas Pass was a dangerous place to transit. Many shipwrecks occurred in the pass, but probably the most important shipwreck was the steamboat Mary. If it not for the actions of 5 Mustang and San Jose Islanders, all of the crew on the vessel Mary would have perished. The entire ship's company survived. And I later found out from Cliff, I guess they were waiting for a pilot to come out, and they hit a buoy and started sinking, and that's what led to the rescue. If not, the Mary incident understood that despite the importance to Texas and the nation, Aransas Pass was a significant threat to human life. Shortly after the Mary incident in 1878, the Aransas Life Station was authorized. The life station grew out of Good Samaritan volunteers aiding vessels in distress. Once established, the service oversaw the location, maintenance, manning, facilities, lifeboats, and the crew. So this is a contract handwritten back there in 1879 for the construction of the number 5 life station in Aransas for the sum total of $1,475. And here's a letter like Cliff said, that we have the original in the back from the Treasury Department appointing John Mercer as the keeper of the life station. I guess the Mercer family was one of the first founding families up on the northern end of Mustang Island. And here's a list of the first 6 surfmen that were appointed to Life Saving Station. The keeper, John Mercer, and these are the names of the first 6 surfmen. So I don't know if you guys could trace that back, if we still have any, you know. And how the government works, we appoint these people surfmen, and then a year later we get authorization to do it. So in 1881, we get a letter from the superintendent, authorize a crew of 6 for Aransas Life Saving Station. When Congress approved the Aransas Life Station, the small settlement on Mustang Island didn't even have a name. There was no store, and the only structure you have seen would have been the Aransas Life Station. There's a contract for 1983 for one of the surfmen. It's in the amount of $50 per month and $3 for incidentals. So that was going rate back then, which I think is a pretty good amount, you know. There's a life station that costs $1,475. The life station had a dock that extends from the boathouse to the station, to the Aransas Channel. The life-saving boats were kept undercover, except during drills and rescue activities. At these times, the surfmen would roll out the boats on the dock to the water's edge. They would then man the boat and row it to the scene of the disaster. The first boats of the life station included a 16-foot skiff for inland cases, a 24-foot 6-inch white cedar and oak surfboat, and a 26-foot self-bailing whaleboat. And that's a rail system they used to use back then. The young station was tasked with patrol and life-saving drills, with housework about the station, and rendered assistance to the ship's industry. Here's a wreck report from 1891, a 16-foot vessel, estimated value of $35. So why I picked this one, I brought a lot of interest to me for this one, and I showed the members of the Coast Guard station this. If you can see all the information they had to write because of the distressed vessel, the time on scene, how long it took them to get out there, we are still collecting that data as of today and putting it in our databases. It's the same information over 200 years later. It was pretty impressive when I showed my guys, this is where it came from, this is why we're doing it. This was another interesting, there's a report of a change in crew. So back then, I guess this is how easy it was. We have a discharge for being drunk and refusing to go on beach patrol. And in the same document, we have his replacement hired, which I just think is amazing. Like, no wonder everything was so nice. Yeah. So here's a document on October 27, 1894. Aransas Life Saving Station was on state land. This was written from the life saving superintendent to the Texas Life Saving Station. And they came up with a settlement for $750 from the Secretary of State to the General Land Office in Austin, Texas. Here's some of the crew, and I don't know if anybody could recognize one of these devices. I had to look it up myself. This is a breeches buoy, which is a rope-based rescue device used to extract people from wrecked vessels or transfer people from one place to another. There's a letter from the Department of Justice to the President for adoption of land from the state. So in 1911, they needed additional additional buildings and additional land property as Aransas became more populated and more of a shipping and export. They wanted to extend the Coast Guard. So there's a document here for over $2 million Texas got from the government for the additional land. In 1915, President Wilson signed an act to create the Coast Guard, which combined the revenue cutter service and the life-saving service into one service. The Coast Guard station in Port Aransas had a new list of jobs to perform, which included rendering assistance to vessels in distress and saving life and property, as we do today, destruction or removal of wrecks, derelicts, and other floating dangers to navigation, extending medical aid to U.S. vessels, engage in deep-sea fishing, protecting customs revenue, operations as part of the Navy in times of war, enforcing the laws and regulations governing anchorage of vessels in navigable waters, suppression of mutiny on merchant ships, enforcement of navigation of other laws governing merchant vessels and motorboats, and enforcement of laws to provide safety of the life on navigable waters during regattas and marine parades. So the young Coast Guard station did not have an easy time starting out. On August 18, 1916, a hurricane hit the area, killing 20 civilians. The overall property loss to the area was estimated more than $1.2 million. Soon after the station and community recovered, another hurricane hit on September 14, 1919. 284 lives were lost and $20 million in property damage were suffered. During these storms, Coast Guard personnel were called upon to alert the residents, to evacuate the town, and to protect property of the inhabitants. In those days, there were few radios, scant weather reports, and few privately owned vehicles. There were no ferry service. There was no public transportation to the mainland. The 1919 hurricane destroyed the Aransas Life Station. And this was one of the most interesting facts I've learned. The interim facility, after the station was lost, before they built the new one, was provided by Robert Mercer, nephew of John Mercer. And it was actually the museum you were just in. So that was the interim station for 6 years until the new station was born. There's some old pictures that Cliff was able to get me. That background's supposed to be the museum, right, Cliff?
Yes.
And there's the new station. In 1917, the station remained open the entire year. Holidays were observed in a special way, looking back in the good old days. The station crew wore full dress, and all work and drills were suspended to observe Independence Day and Christmas. On Christmas, the crew was allowed to leisure from 800 to 0800 to 1600. In 1924, the new station was built on the location of the former life-saving station. So this is on the life-saving station by the radio tower. You can see the Coast Guard, they're practicing their flag drills. This is how we used to communicate with vessels before everybody had radios. There'd be different codes to pass information back and forth between ship to ship or the lighthouse to ships that were coming in. This is a Coast Guard lifeboat in Turtle Cove, 1929. That look familiar? Somebody knows who that is, right? Mr. Tiller? Yep. All the way over here. All right, and there's the Coast Guard station with the Tello House and Tarpoon Inn. That looks like a pretty cool picture. Okay, in May 1937, President Franklin Roosevelt visited the Aransas area. The Coast Guard station provided the vessel with berth and mooring, along with delivering the president's mail to the presidential yacht every day of his stay in the area. That's the USS Potomac. In 1939, the Bureau of Lighthouse was transferred to the Coast Guard. From that day, the station at Port Aransas was charged with the care and maintenance of the lighthouse and dwellings on the harbor, along with harbor light buoys, channel markers, and other Coast Guard mandatory functions. During this time, islanders were invited to dance and other social activities that were held at the station to increase morale. That must have been cool back then. Oh, we go back and forth. This is the baseball team, Coast Guard baseball team. I imagine they played against, the locals and, the fire, or I don't know, if they had the police department going there or whatever they were called. And I mean, I'm sure they didn't travel too far. Okay, so this is a log that we have that the actual museum has from 07 December 1941. And later on that day, they actually had a case where they had a vessel KT in tow. The vessel broke down. It was owned by the Texas State Game and Fish Commission. So when the U.S. entered World War II, the crew of the Coast Guard Port Aransas was increased to 72 personnel, some of who were reserve. The social activities ended, and the Coast Guard station was closed to all unauthorized personnel. The persons living on the island had their cars and persons checked every time that they left and returned the island. So these are some of the barracks that they had during the war for the Coast Guard guys that were patrolling the beach and making sure that no enemy ships were coming on. That was like cool uniform back then. In 1972, Station 2 weathered 7 hurricanes before the compromise of the station's failure in the concrete of the foundation. In 1976, the building of a brand new Coast Guard station showed the community of Port Aransas that the Coast Guard would be around for a long while. The former Coast Guard station was 55 years old when it was replaced. This is a list of the keepers and the officers in charges from 1880 to 1946. Some of the new modernized boats with motors. So I believe this was when I was looking at it, I'm trying to figure out, I believe this was almost like a recruiting poster or a pamphlet with the Coast Guard emblem and the Mustangs in the middle, I guess signifying Mustang Island. I guess trying to get more help for the beach patrols. That's the Coast Guard 38-footer. One of the first in its classes to come out. And this Coast Guard cutter Point Baker. This used to be tied up here at Station Port Aransas before it got shipped overseas for the war. And then it was actually patrolling off the coast of Normandy. This vessel later got replaced with the Coast Guard 82-foot patrol boats, and it kept the same name. but I think it shifted its burden and it moored up somewhere else after the war. And this is the new Coast Guard station from the jetty. 1,300 square foot building has the estimated price tag of $780,000. The new station is planned to maintain a crew of 20 to 24. And that's an aerial shot of the station. In 1979, a chief warrant officer turned his command position to a chief petty officer. Since that time, the officer in charge of Coast Guard Station Port Aransas has been a chief. In February 1979, the station at Port Aransas received the Meritorious Unit Commendation Award for its performance during Hurricane Amelia in 1980. The station had twice as many SAR cases as any other unit in the area. SAR cases are search and rescue cases. Port Aransas became the first unit in the Coast Guard to evaluate the new El Pescador shallow water boat. This was later purchased for other stations up and down or north and south of the Gulf. Coast Guard Station Port Aransas was busy around this time. Some of the cases were the sinking of the fishing vessel Dolphin Express, in which 33 people were rescued, and capsize and sinking of the offshore drilling platform Shoreline X. In the 1990s, law enforcement boardings increased to over 700 yearly. So did educating the public on the safety requirements of the carriage requirements for the boats. And in 1996, yours truly, 140 pounds, Anthony, joined the Coast Guard. Not much has changed, I don't think. In 2003, the Coast Guard was then transferred to Homeland Security Department. And it's got its 11 statutory missions that are the same now. Like Cliff mentioned most of these already: port, waterway security, search and rescue, law enforcement. So that's what the Coast Guard covers now. In 2017, Hurricane Harvey destroyed Station Number 3. After a 5-year project and $28 million later, Station 4 was completed in 2023. We'll get to those pictures. So these are some of the boats that we're using right now at Station Port Aransas. This is a 29-foot response boat. It goes about 42 knots. It could sustain seas up to about 6 feet, 25 knots of wind. Use it for coastal and intercoastal rescues and stuff like that. This is the 45-foot medium response boat, 12-foot seas, 30-knot winds. The boat can right itself if capsized. The station has 2 of these and 2 of those. And there's the new station, $28 million later. Pretty massive. It's 30,000 square foot, Cat 5 hurricane rated, self-powered, contained natural gas. I could totally lose the first floor, they tell me, and nothing will happen. Massive piece of property. I don't know. I asked them, where's the basketball court? Where's the volleyball court? Like, that wasn't in $28 million budget? Like, come on now. So we're going to be working on that during my tour. As you can see up here, that's the generator. Feeds natural gas. So if you get in trouble, come to Coast Guard Station. Gates open a little bit now, every now and then. All right, I think that concludes my presentation. I'd love to answer some questions if anybody has. No, that was just from the letter. It was just a construction of the station.